Welcome back. In Part A, we established that climate is a genuine, systemic financial stability risk. But knowing something is a risk is useless unless you can measure it. And here, supervisors face the green swan problem head-on. How do you measure a risk that your backward-looking models can't capture? This is Part B, measuring and stress testing climate risk. It's where central banks have done some of their most creative and important work, and also where they've run hardest into the limits of the data. The foundational tool is a set of scenarios from the Network for Greening the Financial System, the NGFS, a coalition of central banks and supervisors created specifically to get ahead of climate risk. Rather than each central bank inventing its own assumptions, the NGFS built a common set of reference scenarios, and this chart shows their elegant structure. They're arranged along two axes, transition risk along two axes, transition risk on one and physical risk on the other. That gives you four broad worlds. An orderly world, where we act early and smoothly, low on both risks. A disorderly world, where we act late and abruptly. High transition risk, as sudden policy shocks hit. A hothouse world, where we fail to act, so transition risk stays low, but physical risk becomes catastrophic. And a too little, too late world, the worst of both. The beauty of this 2x2 framing is that it captures the fundamental trade-off of climate policy in one picture. You can pay now through an orderly transition, or pay far more later through physical damage. But you cannot avoid paying. These scenarios are now the common language of climate stress testing worldwide. Let me stress a crucial methodological point because it's where people misunderstand this work. People misunderstand this work. Climate scenario analysis is not forecasting. It does not try to predict what will happen. Instead, it explores a range of plausible long-run pathways, often looking 30 years ahead, far beyond any normal financial forecast. The NGFS provides those common reference scenarios, which central banks around the world then plug into their own models. The outputs are macro financial variables, how GDP, the carbon price, and the energy mix might evolve under each scenario. And these then feed into banks' and portfolios' own risk models to see how they'd fare. The keyword is exploration, not prediction. Because of the green swan problem, nobody can put a probability on these paths or say which will happen. What scenario analysis does instead is ask, what if? If the world takes this path, are you resilient? It's a tool for stress testing your resilience under deep uncertainty, not a crystal ball. And that humility about what can and can't be known is exactly what the green swan concept demands. Armed with these scenarios, central banks have run actual climate stress tests, and it's worth knowing the main ones. In 2022, the European Central Bank ran both a supervisory climate stress test of euro area banks and a test of the euro system's own balance sheet. The Bank of England ran its climate exercise in 2021, and the United States Federal Reserve ran a pilot exercise in 2023. These tests come in two flavors, and the distinction matters. In bottom-up tests, the banks themselves model their own books under the scenarios and report the results. In top-down tests, the supervisor models the whole system itself. Now here's the crucial caveat about all of these. They are, so far, exploratory learning exercises, not yet binding capital tests. That's a vital distinction from ordinary bank stress tests, where failing means bank stress tests, where failing means you must raise real capital. In these climate exercises, no bank was forced to hold more capital because of the results. The goal for now is to build capability, expose data gaps, and get banks thinking, not yet to bind them. Whether and when climate stress tests become hard tests with real capital consequences is one of the big open questions of the field. So what did these tests actually find? The findings were consistent and, frankly, a little alarming. First, banks are materially exposed to climate risk, but largely unprepared. Most lacked robust climate stress testing frameworks of their own. They simply didn't have the systems to measure their own exposure properly. Second, on the Eurosystem's own balance sheet, the ECB found it too is materially exposed, mainly through its corporate bond holdings. The central bank itself is carrying climate risk. Third, a clear and hopeful message. Third, a clear and hopeful message. Acting early, an orderly transition, is far cheaper than acting late or not at all. The stress tests put numbers on Carney's tragedy of the horizon. Delay is expensive. But the fourth finding is the one that constrains everything else. Data gaps remain the binding constraint, especially around Scope 3 emissions and counterparty data. Remember, Scope 3 from the carbon chapter, the hard-to-measure value chain emissions? Here's where that measurement problem bites for real. You cannot stress test exposures you cannot measure, and banks often don't know the emissions of the companies they lend to, let alone those companies' suppliers. So the honest summary is, the test proved banks are exposed and unready, that early action is cheaper, but that our ability to measure it all is still the weakest link in the chain. Given how slow and data-hungry these full stress tests are, researchers have looked for faster, market-based measures, and a clever one is CRISK from Jung, Engler, and Berner. The idea is neat. Instead of a laborious model of a bank's loan book, CRISK uses market data to estimate a bank's expected capital shortfall in a climate stress scenario. Essentially, how much capital a bank would be short if a climate shock hit. It extends a well-established systemic risk methodology called CRISK, which was built after the global financial crisis by adding a climate factor shock, for instance, a sharp move in oil prices or a stranded asset event. And when they applied it, large banks' CRISK rose exactly as you'd expect with oil price and stranded asset shocks, giving a tractable, real-time monitoring tool. The appeal is speed and objectivity. Market prices update every day and reflect the collective judgment of thousands of investors, so CRISK can flag rising climate risk far faster than a stress test that takes a year to run. The lesson is that market data can complement the slow, model-heavy official stress tests, not replace them, but give supervisors an early warning dashboard between the big exercises. It's a good example of academic finance building practical tools for the supervisors. Let's recap. Supervisors measure climate risk through scenario analysis. The NGFS's 4 scenarios along transition and physical axes, which explores plausible 30-year pathways rather than forecasting. Central banks have run climate stress tests, but so far as exploratory learning exercises, not binding capital tests. They found banks materially exposed but unprepared, early action cheaper than late, and data gaps, especially Scope 3, the binding constraint. And market-based measures like CRISK can complement the slow official tests with faster monitoring. In the next video, we turn from measuring the risk to regulating it, the prudential rules and the disclosure architecture. See you there.